You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
TSPN is happy to bring you Foothill Critters, a show for and about local pets, farm animals, and wildlife of our Foothill community. This program is brought to you in part by the, hey Tom, you should do this part.
By the Feed Barn Country Store, locally owned and operated for more than 30 years. By Jeff Holman Auto Center, a name you can trust for 28 years and growing. And by Sierra Hearth and Home, your certified specialists for water gardens, ponds, and waterfalls.
Welcome to TSPN's Foothill Critters. Today we're going to be talking about a passion of mine, which is wildlife rehabilitation. I'm with a group called Tri-County Wildlife Care, and we take in injured, ill, and orphaned wildlife with the hopes of rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing them back out into the wild. Today we're on set where in prior sessions we've been out in the field because we are expressly prohibited from showing wildlife that is currently undergoing rehabilitation. And that's really important because it stresses them if we show them, and it also is counterproductive to our goal of keeping them really wild. But we have brought critters for you to see today, and they're education animals that are non-releasable. Now to my friend Pat. Pat, can you tell us how long you've been rehabilitating wildlife, what type of critters you rehabilitate, and what you fed this morning before you came here?
I've been rehabilitating for about 6 years. I do the Raptors, which is all the owls and the hawks, and the bobcats, coyotes, and foxes. This morning I fed, you want to count? I fed barn owls, I fed hawks, I fed foxes, and the foxes are eating scrambled eggs, mice, fruits and veggies, and all my other critters, my hawks and my owls, they're all eating mice. The babies are not hand-fed anymore. They're getting bigger, so all I have to do is chop them up and put them in their crate.
Okay, now, so you know what she's talking about, she's chopping up mice to feed to baby owls. Okay, next up is my friend Diane with Kindred Spirit Fawn Rescue. Diane, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I got involved in fawn rescue. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I do exclusively fawns. I guess I didn't want to chop rats and mice, so maybe that's why I went that direction. I have 29 under my care currently. We just started the season, so on average we do about 60 to 80 fawns a year. Many of them we can rehabilitate out in the wild, get them out of fences, repair an injury, and let them go back with mom. But the ones that we get in normally are very stressed. They've been attacked by dogs, hit by cars, that type of thing. So right now I have some that are on the bottle racks, and then others that I'm still hand feeding, trying to get them used to that process so that we can move them to the next stage.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And Bruce is with Tri-County Wildlife Care. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Bruce.
I've been with Tri-County now for about 5 years. I primarily do the squirrels and skunks and an occasional fox now and then when Pat gets a little overloaded. And this morning I fed a couple of skunks a worm and egg omelet.
Oh,
one of their favorites.
Yummy.
Yummy,
Yummy, yeah. Well, I know that doing wildlife rehabilitation, we're all unpaid volunteers. And the only real pay that we get is releasing wildlife. So for me, I think that this is about individuals and saving wildlife because their lives to them are as precious as our lives are to us. So it's about the wildlife individual, but I also think that saving wildlife is really saving ourselves because wildlife are like sentinels. And the best example I can give is the peregrine falcon, because in the 1930s and 40s we sprayed DDT and it was a very inexpensive, effective pesticide. But what we discovered was that we were killing the peregrine falcon. Their eggs were breaking when they sat on them, and the peregrine falcon can fly 200 miles an hour, so it's an amazing bird. The other thing is that components of DDT are still found in nature today, so that's pretty frightening. And the peregrine falcon has made a comeback because of captive breeding, but that chemical is still out there. So they also thought that perhaps low human birth weights were attributable to spraying the DDT. So I think that what we do to wildlife, sometimes we do to ourselves. And Pat, I know you work countless hours. What is it about doing wildlife rescue that really is your passion?
Well, the biggest thing is the release, because that is your reward. I think the hawks and the owls are just awesome, and I love to see them flying in the sky. So I want them back out there. The foxes, they're great. They're critters. They're comedians. They love to play in water. They're cute as can be, but they belong in the wild. So yeah, my passion is to get them back out there. That's what I like.
Terrific. And Diane, with your little fawns?
Well, of course, the fawns are like the icing on the cake, but I think it's about educating the communities that surround us. You know, many people will move from the city and they have an opportunity then to experience wildlife when they get in more rural areas, and then all of a sudden a fawn is eating a rose bush and they go, oh, I don't want that here anymore, you know, and it's about learning to live in harmony. And so on our website, we dedicate several pages to how do you live in harmony with fawns and what to do in your garden so that you can have your roses and the fawns can still walk through the area and you can have the beauty of that experience both. So I'm big into education from little kids on up.
Great. And Bruce? Squirrely Bruce.
Squirrely Bruce. I have to agree with Pat that the release is the highlight of the whole thing. Seeing the little critters either run up the tree or run off into the bushes is very rewarding. And of course I have to release a lot of squirrels to keep up with Pat's hawks and owls to give them something to eat. Sounds bad, but it's true in nature.
It is the reality.
It's a reality.
Yes, it's nature.
And another thing that's important is something that a lot of people don't realize when I tell them, but the skunks that we release are very good mousers. And they have a voracious appetite and love to just dig out as many mice as they can, or moles or gophers. And so they're very valuable in that sense, that they help keep control of the rodents.
And today I fed a raven that someone had clipped her wings to try to make her a pet, and of course that's a very big, powerful bird, and they are not pets. And I fed a flight cage of blue jays that are going to be ready for release. Bruce, you brought us a flying squirrel today, which is really common in our area. Can you tell us a little bit about Missy and why she's in our care as an education mammal?
Well, Missy is a northern flying squirrel, which, as Susan said, we have quite a large population of them in our area. They're quite common, although a lot of people don't realize that because of the fact that they come out at night and they're quite small and blend into their surroundings very well. So it's hard to see them. A lot of people are surprised at how many we have around here. We have Missy because when she was first brought in as a little tiny thing, which I have a little picture here about the same size of what Missy was when she was brought in, about the size of my thumb. And it soon turned out that she had one bad eye that needed to be medicated each day to keep it from drying out and getting infected. So rather than have her euthanized, which is our normal procedure if an animal can't be released, we went down to Fish and Game and got a special permit for educational purposes, and she was approved. So now she goes around and sees kids in classes. You can see Missy is being nocturnal. She is wanting to sleep right now. She was awake a few minutes ago, but she's curled up in a ball and wants to go home and get back in her bed. Of course, Flying squirrels don't actually fly, they glide, but they have a very a big flap of skin between each leg on each side. They're covered in fur, and they can catch some really good air in there, going well over 200 feet between trees to escape their predators. They get chased by owls mostly at night, and so they have to have a way to escape the owls, and because the owls will hear them and zero right in on them. They'll take off gliding, and they'll hit the tree they're heading for and then zip around the side so that if there's an owl following them, they'll miss them. And Missy actually does that in her big enclosure at home. She'll leap across and then move to the side real quick. It's a natural, just kind of a natural instinct that they have.
Can you go back to that first picture and show
Yes.
the milk line?
Oh yes. I'm not sure if you can see it in there, but something unusual that flying squirrels have that most the other squirrels don't is that they have a line in their belly that shows up when they've been fed and their bellies are full of milk. You can actually see the milk through the very thin skin. And when we're feeding them, especially when we have a lot of them, we use that as a fuel gauge. So we can keep track of who we fed and who we didn't, and who's full and who isn't, and it's actually quite handy. I don't know if the mother uses it or not, but it's handy for us.
Okay, Bruce, we're going to have to go to break. Thank you for watching Foothill Critters.
We'll be back with more Foothill Critters right after this break. And now back to Foothill Critters on TSPN.
I have with me my friends Diane and Marty. Marty is with Sierra Wildlife Rescue, and Diane is with Kindred Spirit Fawn Rescue. And we're going to talk about fawns. And the unusual thing about fawns is we try very hard not to rehabilitate them. So, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, what happens is people always think of fawns as Bambis, and they associate that story of having Bambi around their house, and they think it's wonderful to have this cute little fawn that they can nurse and put a bottle in its mouth, and that's detrimental to the fawns. Fawns are very delicate. They can only have special formula that's commercially produced for them. By feeding a fawn and taking it out of the wild, you are actually giving it a death sentence. Fawns need their mothers. And one of the things that people don't realize is mothers feed the fawns. They go off for 4 or 5 hours. They browse, they eat, they relax, they come back and they feed the fawns. So the fawn looks like it's orphaned. It's not. It's just waiting for its mother to come back. And we find a lot of time that they're snatched up thinking they're orphan and a mother isn't around. And as Diane can tell you, this happens so often, it's really a shame because these fawns need to be with their mother. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. I think what our mission is to get people to contact us should you see what you think is an orphan fawn. And give us a call. We'll talk you through, number one, is it injured in any way? I mean, can you see blood? Can you see bones? Something like that that would mean it needs an immediate attention. Otherwise, we're going to talk you through the day to leave that fawn alone, give Mom a chance to come back. The fawns are born with no scent, and so one reason Mom leaves them is because she doesn't want to bring predators to them. So she could be 500 yards away and you wouldn't know it unless you go to pick that fawn up and it squeals and all of a sudden Mom pops up and runs over. So there's a lot of those situations that we run into where we'll get a fawn in and we'll talk with the people. We can actually get them back to that area and reunite with Mom. But we'd rather that they're never brought into us in the first place. So first rule of business is call your wildlife organization, talk to the fawn rehabber, and let them advise you as to what to do. But please don't take them to your home and start feeding.
Right. I know one of the best experiences I ever had was a gentleman who called and he had a fawn in a crate, said he'd found it orphaned, and when he described what had happened, it was, seemed to be one that had just been left with Mom. So I asked him to take it back, and he had all kinds of things to do, and I said, no, you really need to go back right away. Well, he had the awesome experience of going back, opening that crate, the baby cried, and Mom came running out of nowhere to bond again with that baby. So I know you were so right that in so many instances, the mom's out there and the baby's just sitting almost as if they've been told that they need to sit tight and wait quietly for Mom. So your instructions to the public would be, if they find a fawn, to wait.
Yes, leave it. Leave it alone. Don't go near it. And always remember, if you're out there and you can see the fawn, even if you feel you're 100 yards away or something, the mother can see you, so she won't come in. And these fawns, when they're born, their natural instinct is to breathe very shallow, lay down, and do not move. So that confuses the general public because they think they're orphaned, and they're not. So a lot of people don't understand, even if you pick up a fawn and you handle it, and your rehabilitation organization ask you to take it back, you can do that up to 3 days. The mother will generally stay in that area looking for her fawn. So the idea that your scent is on the fawn, that's a fallacy. The mother will still take it back. So always try to reunite the fawn with the mother, because does are the best mothers there are. We can't duplicate her, we can only imitate her, and she does the best job.
So the fawns that we're taking in are really just injured, ill, and ones that we are sure are orphaned, like
Yes.
Mom hit on the road and there's a fawn next to it.
Or we do get those occasional, people will say, well, we just found it. But when we get them in, you can tell that they've had them for at least a week. I mean, when they come running to you and they're trying to suckle on your neck and you know, there's a story there, well, those are the ones that we really have a hard time rehabilitating. They've been fed cow's milk. People have tried to feed kitty food or baby cereal, all kinds of things. And then they call and say, well, how's my fawn doing? And we say, well, you know what, it just passed away. And the reason was it came in so sick that we couldn't flush all of that out of its system. So, I mean, number one, be honest about it. Two, please just call us right away. I think more than anything, that's what we're after. We want to educate you on what to do. Certainly we want to take in those that need our care.
Right.
But we just keep trying to stress over and over, leave it with Mom.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think people see this beautiful creature and they think that they will keep it for a while and that they make good pets, but fawns don't make good pets, do they?
They don't, especially when they grow up. So what we see again, I've got one right now. It showed up in an equestrian center as it's following a trainer around. So they called. I've brought it back and I'm trying to wild it up. But that doe, if she ever breeds, she's going to attack whoever gets near her. The bucks will do that when rut season comes. They can look like fun pets out with your goats or cattle or whatever. But you know what? They're wild animals. At some point, that instinct is going to kick in and somebody's going to get hurt. They'll attack dogs, children, whatever.
Especially if they're hungry. If you have a young fawn, you don't realize how sharp their hooves are. They're extremely dangerous, even when they're first born. So a lot of people will feed a fawn, and they'll have it in their house, they'll have it in the yard, and if they're not feeding the fawn enough, it'll come up and want to have food, so it'll actually jump on you with its hooves. And they're razor sharp. We've had many incidents where people have actually ended up in the hospital from fawns cutting their hands and biting their fingers because they're too hungry. They're not getting the proper nutrition. And therefore, they're jumping on people and they come up and they nudge them. We've had people knocked out because they bent over to pick up a fawn and it reared up and its head hit him in the chin and knocked a rehabber out. That was just trying to save a fawn from someone who had taken it in. So we always have to remember, fawns are wild animals. Leave them. Don't go get them. Call a rehab organization, and they'll walk you through everything you need to do, just as Diane said.
You know, the other thing that's important is we have obviously deer in our areas, and we have a lot of challenges with people feeding the deer because they want to bring them in so, you know, they get a closer look at them.
Good point.
Well, what's happening with that is you're creating a communal disease feeding source because one will come in sick, babies get these diseases as well. They're all feeding, and just like you and I, if we share a taste of ice cream between one another, you know, and I have a cold, chances are you're going to get it. Well, now we're seeing our populations are down by 30% on the deer overall in this area. And part of this is due to the fact that people, meaning well again, want to feed the deer and then pass on these diseases from one to another.
Sure. And I think another important thing in telling people not to feed the deer is that when they draw the deer in, then they draw the mountain lions in. And our domestic animals are far easier to catch than a fawn.
Right.
And so calves get eaten, dogs, cats, by the predators that come in that just naturally would eat the fawns. So another thing is that they get attacked by dogs. These little fawns that are drawn in are no match for dogs, and they get caught up in a fence and injured by dogs, and it's really a horrible situation when a person feeds the wildlife, which is illegal.
Right.
They mean well, but they don't realize that when you draw them in, it's dangerous for them.
Not only that, you're teaching them to eat out of their own habitat. They're not eating the proper food for their digestive system. They're not eating the proper food to reproduce with. They need their own nutritional values that they get out of the habitat they're living in. Plus, what you're doing is you're teaching deer to rely on humans. So when winter comes or the person goes on vacation and the food isn't there, the deer are going to start starving because they're not used to out browsing on their own and eating the proper food.
Sure.
But the spread of diseases is astronomical. And then bringing in the predators, as you said, it's just a real sad situation. It's nature at its worst. We need to make sure that we leave everything wild and let nature take its own course.
The other thing, I'm sorry, Susan, but I'm thinking about dog attacks.
Sure.
When people allow their dogs to run free and they're not in enclosed areas, when these little babies are born, they look like fun little toys to a dog. And a dog not necessarily going to be vicious, but thinks, oh boy, something, I run, it moves, and then, you know, so they end up getting it in their mouths, and then they'll create puncture wounds, they can puncture lungs. I mean, we get all kinds of things in that 50% of those make it because of the challenges in the wound care.
Right. So if somebody needs help in El Dorado County, who would they contact?
They would call Sierra Wildlife Rescue, and we have phones that are on 24 hours a day, and they will direct you to volunteers for the species that you need. And we are a very close-knit group, so your call will be returned, and someone will assist you all the way through whether we need to pick up the fawn or you need to return it to the mother.
Great. And what's that phone number, Marty?
621-4661, and the area code is 530.
Okay. And Diane,
For
your county?
Placer, Sacramento, and Yolo counties, we covered all three, and our phone number is 916-847-1471. We also have a website that gives you a lot of information about what to do if you think you found an orphaned or injured fawn. It pops up #1, I'm told, if you Google in fawn rescue. So check that out. And again, we're 24/7 as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And that's all about fawns. And if you have a fawn question or challenge in Amador, Calaveras, or San Joaquin County, call the Tri-County Wildlife Care at 209-547-3233. That's it for fawn rehabilitation. Foothill Critters.
We'll be back with more Foothill Critters right after this break. And now back to Foothill Critters on TSPN.
Now we're back with TSPN's Foothill Critters and Owls. And on to my friend Judy Monastir with Sierra Wildlife Rescue and her great horned owl, Lionel. Judy.
Good morning. This is Lionel, a great horned owl who came, yes, he's talking to me, who came into our care in October of 2006. So I've had him about 6 years. As you can see, his wing droops. It was not broken. We had it x-rayed. But he was not able to fly, and he is not able to control the wing. What we believe happened was that birds have tremendous muscle mass that they use for their flight, and there's a special bone called the corticoid, which controls that muscle mass, and we believe that's what's broken, because his wing is always drooped and he has never been able to fly. We believe that Lionel is a male, but with raptors, you really can't tell whether it's a male or female other than by size. There's a few species that are exceptions to that, but what do you see? Lionel is showing you how well he can turn his head. Birds actually have extra vertebrae in their neck, or owls do rather, and he is able to rotate his neck 275 degrees. So he has tremendous rotation. There's a real reason for that, and that's basically because the eye anatomy is so different. Owls' eyes are fixed in the eye socket, and they are only actually able to move the eye about 5 degrees. So consequently, if you're going to be out and you have predators who are looking out for you, what you have to do is to be able to protect your back, and they do that by being able to rotate their head. Their eyes are really interesting. Owls, of course, are nocturnal creatures, and as a consequence, they do not, we believe, see much in the line of color, but they have very good low-light vision. And so when he's out at night, he is able to see much, much better, probably something very similar to the way you would see with nighttime vision goggles. They're kind of interesting in that their pupils can actually dilate separately. If you and I went to the hospital and our pupils were expanding and contracting at different times, they would say we had a concussion. Let's see. Lionel's also, his eyes, let's see if I can get him to show you the third eyelid, that there's a nictitating membrane that comes down, and they use it to protect their eyelid. It's opaque, and they're able to then see through that and still be able to do things like feed their babies or catch prey, but have the eye protected because it's so very important to them. These beautiful feathers that are sitting on the top of Lionel's head here are not ears. They're just feathers that sit up and come up and down. We believe that they're a defense mechanism that allows Lionel, when he is feeling threatened, to be able to stand up bigger and taller, sort of like, if I'm big and bad, you'll leave me alone. This panting that he is doing here is because he's a little stressed. That's for a couple of reasons. One, it's very bright in here for him. Secondly, it's the middle of his night. I went down and got him at 7:30 this morning, and he was just ready to go to bed. So he's not quite sure what all of this is about. So he calms down, and if you can see inside of his mouth, one of the interesting things about birds is they don't have teeth. Birds swallow their food whole, all of them do. With Lionel's case, Lionel is a great mouser. He loves to catch mice. And what he does is that these beautiful talons here that you can see are his weapon. And that's what he uses to catch the mice. And then what he does is he uses his beak as the tool, once the mouse is dead, to tear it apart and swallow it whole. That brings up a real interesting point in that the stomach acids in owls are not as strong as some of the other raptors, and as a consequence, they don't digest everything that comes up into their mouth. And I have brought along here a little thing that shows you some pellets. And what happens is that the birds swallow the whole pieces of mouse and digest it into their stomach. What they cannot absorb into the body is then packed together by the gizzard, and then the animal regurgitates the pellet. The big pellet you see here on your right is one from a barn owl. The smaller ones are from screech owls, and in the little small one on the bottom, you can actually see some of the bones sticking out. This process takes them about 5 minutes. I guess we're just about done. Lionel and I would like to thank you for having us here. And what I'd like to do is now turn this over to Susan, and she's going to show you, she and Marty are going to show you some small owls.
Yeah, we're over here and Judy's over there because there's no professional courtesy amongst owls. Big owls eat little owls, and that's why my little guy here, who is a saw-whet owl, has been watching Judy and Lionel very carefully. Birds of prey, owls are just like fish. The big guys eat the little guys. Marty is with Sierra Wildlife Rescue, and the owl she has is a pygmy owl. Each owl has a story and why they're with us, because they're non-releasable. So Judy, tell us a little bit about your little pygmy owl.
Well, he came in, some hikers were out jogging along the road, and they found 3 little teeny baby owls right at the edge of the road, and they were covered in black soot and real sticky material, so of course they knew that they needed help and to be rehabilitated. They captured 2 of them. They brought them into Sierra Wildlife, and we rehabbed them. His sibling was released. We couldn't release him even though we cleaned them both up and we got all of the sticky material and the soot out of their eyes and ears. They were eating on their own. They grew into healthy juveniles and then into releasable elves, except this little guy. He will not eat live prey, and he cannot sustain flight for a very long period of time. Therefore, we cannot release him because he would die in the wild because he could not catch prey. And Susan, what's your story with your little guy?
Well, my little guy, you'll see that his wings are not perfect, and birds' wings should be symmetrical, and his wings are not symmetrical because he had a fracture as a baby, and they didn't heal well. So he can get about a foot off the ground, but that's all that he can do. We think it's a real privilege to be able to show these birds to you. I'm going to try to get him to look at you because my friend Judy tells me that these birds bond with their handlers. I'm not his owner, he's not a pet, but he feels safe when he's looking at me, so that's why he looks at me or he looks at danger. If there were something overhead, it's a natural instinct for them to look up and think that they could be preyed upon because they're small. Brutus is a saw-whet owl. The interesting thing about them is that they are common, but you probably will never see one, not only because they're nocturnal, but because they hide in the base of conifer trees, sort of waiting for something to come by, and I think because they know very well that they are small, and little guys get eaten by big guys, so they hang out where they're hidden and where you can't see them very well. Brutus does exactly what Lionel does. When he feels threatened, he'll puff up and try to get really big. And I think the interesting thing about these guys in the wild, and these are not wild birds, so they're not behaving like a wild bird would behave. They actually are just really aggressive. I think they try to make up for size with hitting the cage door and coming at you. Sort of a, I'm going to get you first before you get me, and startle you when you're handling one of them. Yeah.
For their size, they're very aggressive. The northern pygmy owl, actually, it's a little different as far as eating habits because they like to hunt at early dawn and at dusk, and they're just fighters. And if you can see, if you put up a piece of bark, how camouflaged they are. And that's one of their main defense mechanisms, is hiding close to the trunk of a tree so you can't see them. Their lifespan in the wild is very short because they're so small. And they just flutter out and they'll grab anything. They eat mice, lizards, insects, the same as Susan's owl.
You know, another interesting thing about your owl is the markings on the back of his head. Can you tell a little bit about it?
Yeah, those are a defense mechanism, we feel, too. They look like eyes, so when they're on the ground or even in a tree eating, if a predator comes along, it actually looks like the owl is looking at him, and that's a way to deter being eaten.
You know, we had the privilege of rehabilitating one of these owls, and we were so surprised when we released it because it's the same size as a songbird, and all the songbirds flew away.
Yeah.
They knew that we had just released a predatory bird. I think everybody would agree that these are amazing creatures. They're very beautiful, and they're definitely worthwhile rehabilitating, and we feel that it's a real privilege to be able to show them to the public because they're amazing critters that people will probably never get a chance to see in the wild. So these are education birds. We're happy to show them to the public. If you're interested in Amador, Calaveras, and San Joaquin County, you can call Tri-County Wildlife Care at 209-547-3233. And Judy and Marty are with Sierra Wildlife Rescue. What's the number there if they want a class?
621-4661, area code 530. Thank you.
That's all for Foothill Critter Owls.
We'll be back with more Foothill Critters right after this break.
You locate your nearest shelter, you go down there, and you pick out the perfect match for you. Mate.
Find your perfect pet at the shelter. And thank you from Jeff Holman Auto Center, a name you can trust for 28 years and growing.
Sierra Hearth and Home. Sales, service, installation, certified specialist, wood, gas, pellet stoves, waterfall, pond kits, hearth, and water garden accessories. Sierra Hearth and Home.
I am 11, and I still love a good game of hide and seek.
Cats are great at hiding, especially their age, though their immune system may be weakening inside. But IAMS has age-specific nutrition, and now there's IAMS Senior Plus for cats 11 and older. It helps boost the immune response to that of an adult cat and helps fight signs of aging.
I'll never get too old for this game.
New IAMS Senior Plus. See the IAMS difference or your money back.
I am an IAMS cat for life.
And now back to Foothill Critters on TSPN.
Welcome back to TSPN's Foothill Critters, and we're going to talk a little bit about wildlife education. And Tri-County Wildlife Care is a non-profit organization, and one of our missions is to educate the public to live in better balance with wildlife. And Pat is here. She's our Raptor team leader. And tell us a little bit about Katie.
Well, Katie is an American kestrel. She is a female. She came to us about 3 years ago, so we figure she's a little over 3 years old. And she, unfortunately, was kept as a pet. Somebody got her as a very small baby, and they tried to make a pet out of her. So she is what's called imprinted, which means that she kind of thinks she's a person and not a bird. So she is non-releasable, so we have a permit to keep her as our education bird. She is the smallest falcon in North America, and she can fly about 60 miles an hour, and she hovers. She eats mice and whatever kind of little grub worms that she could get in the wild. However, at home, she gets 2 mice a day.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit more about why she can't be released in the wild if she can fly and do everything?
She can fly. She is perfectly normal, healthy bird, which is very sad, and that's part of our education. We do not want to make pets out of these animals. They are wild. When you keep a bird like this and you keep it as a pet and tame it, she has no wild abilities. She doesn't know how to hunt. She doesn't know she's a bird. She lands on people instead of flying away. She has no fear of people, and that's just, it's wrong. It's just, this is the sad part. You know, this is what we don't want to do, is make a pet out of wildlife. We want to keep them wild and get them back to the wild. Yeah, she'll never be released. So this beautiful little bird who is fully flighted, healthy, will never be free.
It's it's really selfish when people try to
It's very
make
sad.
wildlife into pets. And what we find is so often they can never be free, and people find them inconvenient after the new wears off and they
Exactly.
realize that she bites and that she claws and that she will never make a good pet.
Exactly. That's what I think. She was passed on to about 3 different people before they realized that, you know, she's just not fun. She's not cute. She's not Gucci Goo. She's not a parrot.
Right.
Like you say, she does bite. She, you know, she wants to be free. She just doesn't know how. It's very sad.
So the lesson that she has to teach us is that wildlife should be wild, and they do not make good pets. And one of the things that we're doing in classrooms is we may have one child stand inside of a box and tell them they may not move out of that box, while we have another one circle around the room and do, you know, what kids and perhaps a wild bird would do, so that they can kind of get a feeling of how this would be for this poor bird that will never mate, will never fly free, will never catch their own food, and, you know, soar and do all the fabulous things that these critters should be able to do. It's really a selfish act. Bruce, Missy is with you earlier, the flying squirrel,
Yes.
and she can't be released because she has a bad eye.
Right.
I know that she was found on the ground. Is that another lesson about wildlife mothers and what they might do if there's a problem with a baby?
Well, quite often in nature, if a baby has some sort of defect, whether it's genetic or in this case there was an eye problem, the mothers have such a hard job raising their young that if one of them isn't right and they feel that it's not going to grow up normally, that they will actually kick them out of the nest and concentrate all of their efforts on the healthy ones that are left over.
Sure. So sometimes we as rehabilitators take in critters that are injured, ill, or orphaned, but we can take in ones that are not viable, where the mother knows it and it's not something that's readily visible, because that squirrel didn't even have its eyes open.
Right.
Right. So what type of groups are our target groups to go out and educate? Classrooms only, or different groups? Will we pretty much make a presentation to anyone who asks?
We will make a presentation to anyone that asks.
Everybody.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do preschoolers. We do junior high kids. We do all kinds of. I'm going to do a senior group. Yeah, anybody who asks, we will do. We will bring our critters and teach them about wildlife.
And I know we've gone to visit Bird Club, a women's group. So we really are very broad in where we will go and spread the message of living in harmony with wildlife. I know one of the things that I think is so important about education is reaching the young people, and I'm amazed at how much they know when we go to talk to a classroom, particularly about the birds and a lot about what's going on. I think our goal has to also be, though, living in harmony with nature and having as small a footprint as we can. And what are some of the things that we teach them that are green? Green, and things that things that kids can do.
The big thing that the kids are doing is recycling. They want to recycle everything, which is great. They've got that down really good. So yeah, I hear that in all the classrooms. Recycle. Right,
and I know that a lot of times they'll ask us, what can we do to bring wildlife to us? And one of the things I always say is, if you have property, leave some of it wild for wildlife, and they won't, you know, don't bring them close to your house or feed them, but if they're on the periphery and you've left wild spaces, then they can be quite beneficial.
There's nothing better to enjoy is watching wildlife in their wild habitat playing. Like the foxes in a pond, you know, the birds soaring down to get a rodent, and they're good rodent controls. So excellent rodent control.
Yeah, I think that the owl that Judy showed us earlier can eat as many as 10 mice a night. So what better critter? And I know your favorite is barn owls. Any idea how? I know they love barns and cavity dwellers.
They do. We had an excellent one the other day in the landfill, the dump in Jenny Lind, is it?
Mm-hmm.
They had called and they had a barn owl down. They had caught it and put it in a crate for us. And when we showed up, we went and looked at where it was. Mom and Dad were sitting way up high up there. And we said, you know, is there any way you can get him back? And they said, well, yeah, we can get up fairly high. And we said, do that. Get it up as high as you can, and then call us if you have a problem. We will come back. And I got an email, and they said that they put it up twice, and the parents were there watching. And the third time this little guy came down, he flew right out the big door, the bay, and it says he's out there flying. So that was great. I mean, we told him that he was like maybe 2-3 days away from really flying, and it worked. It was excellent. It was a good release, and we weren't even there.
Nice. So sometimes our education is with the callers and what to do when they have wildlife, and we can coach them through allowing the wild parents to raise their babies and or to leave the critter out in the wild until, in the case of fawns, the mom returns.
The parents raise them much better than we do. I mean,
right.
We have a good survival rate, but the parents are much better raisers.
Well, and isn't rehabilitating wildlife, since we're a nonprofit organization, pretty darn expensive?
Very expensive.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I probably am feeding close to 100 mice a day now. We have 15 barn owls, 3 great horned owls, various hawks. So, yeah, we're going through a tremendous amount of mice.
Well, I know for the raven and the little owl that you saw earlier, I go through 5 or 6 mice a day, fruits, vegetables, nuts, all kinds of things. And the only eggs, lots of eggs. And the only reason that these critters are in our care is because they cannot be released. So we almost kind of consider it a failure. Yeah. And Bruce, the critters that you're feeding, I know you specialize in squirrels, but right now you just have a couple of skunks. What's in their diet?
Oh, they also eat mice, a lot of eggs, mealworms, and all kinds of different vegetables. One of their favorites is corn on the cob.
Oh.
They'll chew those down real good.
Yeah.
And I often give them trimmings off of our meals. If having chicken or something like that, trim the chicken and then give them the trimmings, and they love it.
Oh, so they're kind of scavengers. Well,
they can be, yeah.
Yeah. I want to give a special thank you to Judy and Marty with Sierra Wildlife Rescue. You've seen 3 different groups here, and we network together. And one of the beautiful things is earlier in the season, Pat got in a great horned owl from Sierra Wildlife Rescue because great horned owls imprint on people very easily, and we don't want that to happen. So we pair them so that they know that they're owls, and it's beneficial to us. Marty and Judy were so instrumental in helping us get an education permit and getting education critters. We really are very appreciative to them. So if you need wildlife class in Amador, Calaveras, or San Joaquin counties, we're happy to come talk to any group or classroom. And our name is Tri-County Wildlife Care. Our website is tricountywildlifecare.org. And you can reach us on the phone at 209-547-3233. So that's all for Foothill Critters. And thank you, Pat and Bruce, with Tri-County Wildlife Care.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Foothill Critters is show for and about local pets, farm animals, and wildlife of our Foothill community have been proudly brought to you in part by the...
Hey, Critter, let me do that part.
Oh, yeah, okay. It's your part anyway.
By the Feed Barn Country Store, locally owned and operated for more than 30 years. By Jeff Holman Auto Center, a name you can trust for 28 years and growing. And by Sierra Hearth and Home, your certified specialists for water gardens, ponds, and waterfalls. You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.